Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another video for you. A while ago in a Q&A video, I talked about some of my rare items that I own in-game. Since that was just one question and part of a whole other video, I didn't go too in-depth and I skipped a lot of stuff. So, in this one, I thought I'd give you the complete edition and show you the rarest items I own, or just interesting items in general that have cool backstories to them, I think. I've been playing since March of 2005, so as you can imagine, I have lots of stuff from every expansion. Typically, the rare stuff will be before Cataclysm though, when they made a lot of this stuff no longer obtainable. A lot of it is junk that really has no use whatsoever, but I kept it because I'm a pack rat. And other items are actually pretty useful, and I've been waiting 13 years for the right moment to use them. Let's start with my rogues, since this ended up being my most played class in vanilla. So just a warning, if you saw that Q&A video I posted a while back, you will see some repeats here. So, in no particular order, first up we have the Tabard of the Protector. This is one of the rarest tabards in-game, I think. You got it from the Burning Crusade launch event, from a quest that required you to kill demons near the Dark Portal, so the window to get it was very small. And I remember the quest was pretty rough since there were hundreds of people camped right outside of the gates, spamming AoE, and this was back when mobs didn't share, let alone being on a PvP server. Looks-wise, it's not so unique since it's just the Argent logo. The thing that makes it special is the on-use effect, where you can show how heroic you are. Now that's epic. A cool little Holy Nova effect. One of the cooler tabards, I think. And since we're talking about tabards, I also have the Tabard of the Argent. Dang, how many tabards do these guys have? This one you got from the original level 60 Naxxramas Scourge Invasion event. Blizzard had a few nifty events in vanilla to celebrate raid releases and whatnot. We had the opening of Encourage for those two raids, and we had the Scourge Invasion for Naxxramas 40-man. The evil Lich, Kel'Thuzad, was invading Azeroth, and all around the world outside of town hubs, you can find these patches of Scourge wandering about. And if you killed them, you could get special items called Necrotic Runes, which allowed you to buy special epic armor, buffs, potions, and the Tabard of the Argent. So, again, a very time-limited thing that's pretty rare to see these days. And, speaking of Naxxramas, I got a couple of set items from there. The Bonescythe bracers and boots, with the original enchants on them, as you can see. My guild didn't get too far in here because we called it quits pretty early, but we got a few bosses down. I think it was all of the Spider Wing, and maybe one or two in each of the other wings, and I kept these pieces as souvenirs of our time spent in there. You can still get the full set via the black market auction house though, so they're still technically obtainable, although pretty rare to see the full set. And another vanilla item here is the Seal of Ascension. This item doubles as a ring, and also a key. Back when the Blackrock Spire was one big instance, the door to the upper area was locked, and to open it, you needed the Seal of Ascension. You got it from a quest which was short, but still a pain in the butt to complete. On the lower side, you went up this ramp to the side, and you came across this special NPC who asked for 3 items. The unadorned Seal of Ascension, which dropped from the trash in the instance, and 3 special gems that dropped from 3 different bosses. The unadorned seal was pretty easy, but the gems only had a chance to drop from each boss, and only 1 dropped, so you were also competing against other people, and if you were pugging it, it would take a dozen runs and a bit of luck to complete this quest. At first, keybearers were hard to find, and I remember a few times people would pay me gold just to open the door for them. So it was also a cool, unconventional way to make some gold on the side. So there's a tip for those of you who are going to play Classic when it releases. Old school raiders may remember the Eternal Quintessence. This used to be required for the Molten Core raid. Near each boss, you have these runes of fire that extinguish automatically upon the boss's death, and once all of them are doused, the penultimate boss, the Majordomo Executus, is summoned, and if you defeat him, he of course leads you to Ragnaros. But originally, these runes had to be manually doused. You may have also noticed that there's a reputation tied to the Molten Core called the Hydraxian Waterlords. These guys were located way out in the Shara of all places, and they sold you these vials of water called Aqual Quintessences, which allowed you to douse one rune. They were consumed on use, so you had to go back and forth between each raid and fetch a new one, which was a huge chore because the geography of Ashara was horrible. It was a nightmare to navigate, so much so that Blizzard actually abandoned it and hardly put any quests or reasons to go there, aside from the Waterlords. Once you reached Revered with them though, you could buy this Eternal Quintessence, which had infinite uses, so you never had to go back. I remember that this took quite a few runs back in the day. It's pretty easy now, but I think back then, only the bosses gave you reputation past honored, I want to say, so it took months and months of weekly raiding to reach Revered. So, I worked pretty hard for this. I don't care if it's useless now, I'm never selling it. Another pretty unique key was the Drakefire Amulet, which any old school raider knows was needed to get into the Onyxia's Lair raid. You got this after a very, very long and difficult quest chain where you had to go all over the world, do a ton of solo and group content, and in the finale for the Alliance, you had to escort the Martial Windsor out of the Blackrock Depths instance, which was a nightmare. I did that so many times to help people get keyed, it's forever burned into my memory. And the part after that, all of you Alliance may remember, even if you didn't do the chain, was you confronted Lady Katrana Prestor in the Stormwind Keep, and you had a big battle there in the throne room against her minions. As a reward, you got this amulet, which lets you zone into the raid. It was pretty useful as actual gear too, because it had fire resistance, which was needed for Ragnaros in the Molten Core, so people definitely did use it aside from a key. A cool little piece of the game's history. And speaking of fire resistance gear, I also have this trinket called the Royal Seal of Eldre'Thalas. This was made mandatory to get by my guild back in the day. Like I mentioned, Ragnaros needed a lot of fire resistance. Pretty much every slot needed some of it, and my guild was pretty adamant about it, and they wouldn't let us raid if we weren't collecting stuff like this. You got this one from the Dartol instance from the now removed reputation, the Shendralar. From any boss inside the dungeon, you could get these class books, which, if you returned them to the library also inside the dungeon, you got these trinkets as a reward. They varied in stats depending on the class you were, as you would imagine. The only thing they shared was this fire resistance. The rogue one, as you can see, has critical strike, although back then it was originally hit percentage, which was still useful, especially considering that good trinkets were so rare back then. I guess I may as well mention these various Librams while I'm at it, since there were a few that were tied to Diarmala as well. You also looted some of these from mobs inside the dungeon, and if you returned them to the library, along with some other random crafting materials, you could get some special enchants to your legs or a headpiece. Some of them required another NPC in the Burning Steppes, I'm pretty sure, but the ones for the Diarmal served as the main way for grinding reputation with the Shendralar, which used to be required for the Insane achievement prior to the Cataclysm expansion. So, everything that was associated with them was made to no longer drop, making these sort of rare, although I'm sure there are others who've kept a few here and there just for collection's sake. Some of them also had these neat little pictures in them that gave you a hint of where to turn them in and what materials you need to complete the quest. Back then, database sites weren't used as much, I think, so hints like these were pretty vital. Next, we have another tabard and a pet. This one is the Competitor's Tabard. It was only obtainable during the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, and if you did a battleground during this time, you got this tabard as a reward whether you won or lost. But if you won a battleground, you had a chance to also get a pet called the Spirit of Competition, which is this little dragon-like creature. The event only lasted for a couple weeks, I believe, so it was a pretty short time window. But a cool reward. I mentioned the AQ40 event earlier. If you saw my recent Scepter of the Shifting Sands video, you may remember the Agent of Nozdormu. This was needed for part of that quest chain to unlock the gates to Ankh-Kiraj, and it allowed you to pick up carapace fragments from the Silithid enemies in the game, which you turned in for reputation 200 at a time. Although I never finished the chain, I did keep my badge as a souvenir of a cool event. And hey, the flavor text said to keep it in my bags at all times, so I'm just following orders here. The quest chain is long gone, and so too is the means to obtain this badge, one of the many victims of the Cataclysm expansion. Here's one that's not really rare, but interesting I think, and that's the Shard of the Fallen Star trinket. This thing dropped in the AQ40 raid in vanilla, off of the trash mobs right before the Twin Emperors, which were ridiculous by the way. There were several of these guys. They had an insane amount of health, did a ton of damage, and it was pretty common that you'd wipe to them. They were like mini bosses pretty much, and I'd remember sometimes they take so long to kill, the first one we killed would respawn before we killed the last one. It was ridiculous. This was partly due to the insane corpse run in AQ40 back then. Not only did you have to run through the portal, but also all the way through the whole instance, up to this hallway. These things were the bane of my existence, and if anyone complains about trash mobs today, I always like to bust out these guys as an example. Back in my day, we had the Anubis South Warders, I'll tell you what. Okay, whoa, I'm getting off track here. Back to the item. I wanted to mention this mainly because of its effect, which was amazing at the time. When you use this, it summoned a meteor from the sky that dealt some fire damage. This thing was just a blast to use in PvP, and you'd always try to use it as a finisher. Get someone to like 5% life, blind them or something, take a few steps back, and pow! Right in the kisser. This always got a few laughs, and the person who died would always take a few seconds to release because they'd be in shock of what the heck just happened. Like, did Goku just spirit bomb me from behind? What's going on? Like I said, it's not that rare probably, but pretty interesting and cool, and one of my favorite items in the game for sure. Another one of the cooler trinkets you could get back in the day was the Barov Peasant Collar. Like I said, trinkets were pretty rare back then, but they were also pretty unique. This one you got after a quest in the Eastern Plagueland Zone, where you went to the opposite faction's hub and assassinated the Barov family member there. When you use it, it summons some manservants that attack your target. This was also pretty funny to use in PvP and watch people panic. And it's still useful today for the Viscidus boss fight, where you have to shatter him by hitting him with a bunch of physical attacks within a limited time frame. But it's no longer obtainable since, you guessed it, Cataclysm. Another fun item is Dartol's Rod of Transformation, which was one of the first toy-like items in the game. You got this from a quest in the Ashenvale zone back in vanilla. You had to use it to turn yourself into a furbolg so you could sneak into a compound, but if you held on to the quest, you could keep the wand. And it was usable anywhere, so you could go furbolg mode to mystify nearby players. It stayed on in combat, but it did disappear if you took damage. Still though, it's pretty cool. You can't get it anymore since the Cataclysm revamp, but you can get a knockoff peasant version from the Timbermaw Hold faction at Exalted called the Stave of Fur and Claw, but this one sucks since it has a 1 hour cooldown. They just don't make them like they used to. Next up, we got a couple of rogue items. the Thieves tools, and the Certificate of Thievery. Any rogue worth their salt has to have these. You got them from your old rogue quests back in the day. The Thieves tools you actually needed for disarming traps and picking locks, I'm pretty sure, and the Certificate of Thievery was just a flavor item that showed that you're officially a rogue, so I had to make sure that I held on to that. You got this one after a level 20 class quest where you have to sneak past a bunch of enemies and reach a chest. It reads, "The bearer of this certificate is entitled to the respect and regard that any first-rate pilferer and thief deserves." Nice. I also got a few shirts that I should talk about. First is the Sawbones Shirt. This had a low chance to drop from the Dr. Theolin Krasnodar boss in the old Scholomance dungeon. Sort of sought after since it's technically dungeon loot. You want to brag to people about your gear, so your shirt game better be on point too. Like, hey, this is a dungeon shirt, buddy, okay? This is no longer obtainable ever since the Scholomance revamp in Pandaria, but I believe it does pop up in the black market auction house occasionally. And I also have the Sleeveless T-Shirt. This is still obtainable, although I think it's still pretty rare because it sells for about 20,000 gold on the auction house. You can get this from looting corpses in the Alterac Valley battlegrounds, so this is like the PvP shirt. And appropriately, it has a little joke in the flavor text saying that the owner is one Earl Z mode, which is referring to easy mode, which is a common complaint in the PvP scene. I got bonus points since I got it on a rogue, which back in the day a lot of people would say was easy mode for PvP. So a must-have for any PvPer out there. Moving on to some actual gear here, I have the Thunderfury sword, which is kind of rare I guess. It's still obtainable today, so it's not super rare, but still pretty uncommon I think due to the method of obtaining it. You have to loot 2 items called Bindings of the Windseeker from 2 bosses in the Molten Core, which is Gar and Geddon. They drop at a 1% rate, so one shot a week at them is pretty rough. And from there, you follow a short quest chain, gather a bunch of materials, and take out a Windlord to loot the actual sword. I got mine after the fact, many years later. Definitely one of the coolest weapons, even to this day. There was a big debate back in the day about what class should have priority. Being a rogue, I've always said rogue, but if you look at it objectively, it's probably Protection Warrior. And that's because they were the main tanks in Classic, and the proc on the weapon is more based for defense, it had good threat generation, and the speed was fast, which is what you wanted as a tank. And even if that's not enough to convince you, tanks even used it in the next expansion at level 70 just because of that proc. Definitely one of the more iconic weapons in the game, and we'd see it re-released as a rogue appearance in Legion, and even a crossover in Diablo 3, which is Blizzard's action RPG game. An interesting set of swords I've always liked are the Warblades of the Hakkari set from the old Zul'Gurub raid. You could get these from the level 60 version off the final boss, Hakkar. They're quite unique looking because they actually sheath on the back, so you have that whole ninja thing going on. The flavor text reads, "Forged in the seething flames of hatred," and like I said, they're an actual set, which was strange. You saw armor sets all the time, but weapon sets? Not so much. The swords are no longer obtainable since the original raid is now gone, but they were re-released as daggers in the Cataclysm version. But if you want to transmog them as swords, you have to own the originals. I believe there is also a sword version as well, but it doesn't sheath on the back, which diminishes its coolness by at least 50%. Now here's some unconventional items for you. I can safely say that I'm the only person in the world who owns these. A little backstory first though. Back in vanilla, I had a lower level druid that I ended up PvPing with a lot. Mainly in the 30 to 39 and the 40 to 49 brackets. I really liked flag running in the Warsong Gulch, and druids were the best flag runners back then, hands down. I made some friends, and this was before Discord and whatnot were commonplace, so our main form of communication was in-game through whispers, or through letters if we were offline. If you want, you can actually save these letters and turn them into in-game items, which I did. So, here's 2 random letters from 2006-ish, about 12 years ago. Hey Storm, hope you are ready for Maraudin. The plan changes since you talked to Cass. We will be running it Sunday night, if that's okay with you, around 3 in the morning, if that's okay with you. If it's not, tell me soon. Thanks. Silent Fire. From Silent 208-2A5. Alright, Maraudin at 3 AM. Gotcha. Better save this letter in case I forget. Out of all of the things in my life, this was the most important. Funny enough though, I'm pretty sure I didn't even make it to the run. Hey, 3 AM is a little rough, even if I was a 15-year-old with no life. Here's one from my PvP team. We got a few wins in a row there, and I think things are starting to come together. Communication is key, and we need to get better at it, on and off the field. This mail doesn't work for sending long mails to multiple people. I set up a Yahoo group, WoWBG team. To get access, put your character's name in the info when signing up. From Baragon. Whoa, Yahoo groups, now that's some high-tech stuff right there. Not as hardcore as AOL Instant Messenger, but it'll do. Oh my god, it's still there. You're looking for the best of the best, sir, Men in Black. Welcome to the home of the best of the best of the best. Whoa, triple layers. Since you're reading this, you're good enough to get an invite and a team player we enjoy playing with, and interested enough in playing better to come here. I hope we can get about 15 people active so we can field 10 on a regular basis. We're looking for a team of players with potential. If the potential is there, the skills will improve, but a team player attitude is tough to learn. Now that's hardcore. I should open up every video with the Men in Black quote from now on. You see that, guys? I was good enough to get an invite into this elite group. Never doubt my extreme skill, okay? Alright, well, that's enough for this one, I guess. I do have more rare priceless treasures that I want to cover. I have everything listed out, and it's enough for a few 20-minute-ish videos, so I think we'll come back to this soon. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one if you decide to join me. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.